Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to another weekly Tafsir Halaqah as we continue the Tafsir of the beautiful Surah Yusuf. Inshallah, we'll be starting with verse number 16 until 20 today. So without further ado, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجاءوا أباهم عشاء يبكون قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند متاعنا فأكله الذئب وما أنت بمؤمن لنا ولو كنا صادقين وجاءوا على قميصه بدم كذب قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل والله المستعان على ما تصفون وجاءت سيارة فأرسلوا واردهم فأدلى دلوه قال يا بشرى هذا غلام وأسروه بضاعة والله عليم بما يعملون وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين صدق الله العظيم. Brothers and sisters, last week we were discussing and we went over the account of the brothers of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, first and foremost conspiring amongst themselves on how to get rid of Yusuf, and then they came and they basically convinced Yaqub alayhi salam to let go of Yusuf alayhi salam. Although he let him go very reluctantly, he still trusted them to a certain point, and we see that what level of betrayal they carried out. The trust of Yaqub alayhi salam, how they betrayed him, and how they treated Yusuf alayhi salam, and they were basically going to kill him. And then we also went over the fact that his brother Yehuda, he saved him and he encouraged, and he was able to negotiate with his other brothers that they should not kill Yusuf, but rather throw him into this desolate well that was there. And subhanAllah, we know from the books of Tafsir that this well is actually not a well that was on the main road, that very frequently caravans will come and go, and they will basically draw water from this well, and very soon he'll be rescued. No, it's not even like that. Rather, the well that they threw him in was a very, very desolate well. It was a well that was in the middle of the jungle. It was completely out of the way. And subhanAllah, they thought to themselves that he's not going to survive in this, right? It's a well that's filled with critters, with scorpions and insects and snakes and other poisonous creatures. Eventually he's going to die into this well, and he's going to basically be removed from our lives and from from the attention of our fathers, etc. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan is such that subhanallah, we'll see how Allah rescues him from the middle of this desolate well. But what happened is, as we continue, so when they had basically carried out their plan, last week we ended off with the fact that when they had approached this well, how they had actually tied the hands of Yusuf alayhi salam. They first made him take off his shirt, and then they tied his hands, and at this time also he was crying out to them, and he was asking them for help, and they would basically give him the same answer, that why don't you seek help from the 11 stars and the sun and the moon that you saw, why don't you seek help from them? And this is the only thing that they would repeat, and they wouldn't listen to any of his appeals. And Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam was holding on to the well basically and pleading with them. And even then, it did not, affect their hearts. They put him into the bucket of the well, and they lowered him halfway, and then they cut the rope, thinking that, he would crash into the ground, and basically he would fall to his death. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that through His infinite plan, that although the rope was cut halfway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the bucket hit the water, and he was able to climb out of that bucket, and he was able to basically take shelter on a protruding rock. And according to some narrations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually sent Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, who basically caught Yusuf alayhi salam, and then he put him onto that ledge, onto that rock, where he stayed there for the next 3 days. And as we said, that Yehuda, because he not only did he feel guilty that they had abandoned their little brother, he also remembered his promise that he had made to Yaqub alayhi salam, which also propelled him to not only stop his brothers, but try to convince them not to go through with their plot and with their plan. And when that did not succeed, he would secretly bring food to Yusuf alayhi salam, and he would bring drinking water, and he would make sure that he had food and water to survive. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells us what happens next, right? That وَجَاءُوا أَبَاهُمْ عِشَاءً يَبْكُونَ, right? In ayah number 11, or ayah number 16, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they came to their father, at the evening time, in the state of hysteria. They were crying, they were absolutely weeping, and they were basically making a scene. So Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, he comes out, and he's like, what's wrong? What happened? Did you lose any of your sheep? Did you lose any property? Where's Yusuf? Basically they're hysterical, right? So in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that they basically made this excuse, right? That قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند متاعنا فأكله الذئب. That, our father, basically we went racing, and we left Yusuf with our luggage, with our belongings. And what happened was, in that meanwhile, a wolf came and ate Yusuf, right? Because as I said before, that because Yaqub alayhi salam had already kind of displayed this fear that he would be eaten by wolves. And we said that the reasoning for this was that there was an abundance of wolves in that region of Canaan, or it was because of the dream that Yaqub alayhi salam saw, in which 10 wolves attacked Yusuf alayhi salam, and then one of them came and he tried to protect them from the others. So the interpretation that Yaqub alayhi salam made for this dream was that his brothers would plot against him. So they used the same logic and the reasoning that Yaqub alayhi salam had given at the time of letting Yusuf go with them. They used the same excuse, and they said that فَأَكَلَهُ الذِّئْبُ, we left him alone, and then a wolf came and ate him. وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُؤْمِنٍ لَنَا وَلَوْ كُنَّا صَادِقِينَ. And now they're making, in order to hammer in their point, they're trying to guilt their father as well by saying that you're not going to believe us, right? Even though we're speaking the truth, you're not going to believe us, right? You always, you don't trust us. You don't depend on us. And, this is something that, although we're speaking the truth, you're still not going to believe us, right? So this is something that, subhanAllah, they knew that this was a lie, that they were speaking a lie, yet they still chose to guilt their father into thinking that they were speaking the truth in such a way that it would hurt Yaqub alayhi salam even more, right? And this is something that we take a lesson from. That number one is, there will be people that will sometimes come to us seeking help and assistance, and we see this, subhanallah, many a times where people at the masjid maybe come seeking assistance, or maybe as Muslims, as individuals, people will come to us seeking help, seeking assistance, asking for money, asking for help, and they will present a very hysterical condition, right? They will appeal to you, and they will have a lot of sad stories, and they will have a lot of, and I'm not saying that every person is disingenuous, but what we do need to recognize is that sometimes there will be people who are going to want to take advantage of the softness that we have, right? The qualities that we are taught as believers to be kind and caring. Some people will seek to use those qualities for their own benefit and to take advantage of us. So we need to be very, very careful about that. Don't just, give in to a person's hysteria. Don't just believe every person's story, because you don't know if they're lying. You don't know if they have an agenda behind what, behind what they're trying to, do to you or ask from you, whatever the case is. So this is one lesson that we learn, from this, that Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, by him revealing his inner fear of Yusuf being eaten by wolves, they took this information and they turned it against him. Number two is وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُؤْمِنٍ لَنَا وَلَوْ كُنَّا صَادِقِينَ. Right? By this statement, by them saying that you're not going to believe us, I'm really speaking the truth, brother, sister, I really need this, I'm telling you the truth. Wallahi, billahi, a person, takes the name of Allah. A person takes an oath by Allah. And, as believers, we want to, when a person takes the name of Allah, you want to help that person. You want to go out of your way, because your iman and your faith and your belief teaches you that when a person takes the name of Allah, this is not something, ordinary. This is not something just, simple. It's not just a simple statement. It carries a lot of weight with it. So people will literally come to you and they'll take the name of Allah and they'll say, and they'll speak lies to you, in your face. So it's very, very important to be, careful of that. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us in the hadith that ittaqu firasat al-mu'min fa innahu yanzuru bi nurillah. That beware of the foresight of a believer, because the believer gazes with a special light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that Allah gives, wisdom. Allah, wisdom is, an intrinsic quality of a believer. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us in another hadith that لا يلدغ المؤمن من جحر واحد مرتين, that a believer is not stung by the same hole twice. What does this mean? That if you if you go through a situation where you experience negativity, where you get burnt, by someone or by something, you don't go and you don't put yourself in that state again, right? To be burnt by the same person, to be abused by the same situation. A mu'min is supposed to be above and beyond that. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. That is what the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us in this hadith. So nevertheless, the brothers of Yusuf, they came and they spoke this lie to their father about what had actually happened to Yusuf alayhi salam. And in order to corroborate their story, in ayah number 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءُوا عَلَى قَمِيصِهِ بِدَمٍ كَذِبٍ, that they came with fake blood on his shirt, right? So remember, they had actually made him take off his shirt. And this was one of the reasons ulama and scholars say that they plotted beforehand that how are we going to come and what is going to be our story before our father. So this was a pre-planned, thing that they had plotted amongst themselves about, that they would take the shirt, and what they did is that they slaughtered a baby goat, and the blood that came out from that, they smeared it on the shirt and they brought it, right? So this blood-soaked shirt is in front of Yaqub alayhi salam, and they're saying that, look, this is the evidence that Yusuf was eaten by a wolf, right? But, subhanAllah, as soon as Yaqub alayhi salam saw the shirt, right, immediately he understood that what they were saying, or that their narrative was a lie, because he told them that, look, that wolf that ate Yusuf must have been a very wise and very smart wolf, because he ate Yusuf in such a way that there's no wear and tear on the shirt, right? There's no tears, right? It's a completely, it's completely fine. There's no scratch marks on it. There's no like claw marks on it. There's no biting. There's no tearing. So it's like, did the wolf just stand by there and ask him to take off his shirt and then devoured him? So immediately upon seeing that shirt, Yaqub alayhi salam understood that they were speaking a lie. That's why in the next statement he says, قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا. That rather your souls, right, your nafs, your nufus have your egos have enticed you into committing something, right? What does this mean? That when a person follows their nafs and their desires, and their egos have not been tempered, right? Then their egos will always lead a person's ego will always lead a person to commit haram, to commit something that is evil, right? We find that the same statement is also made by Samiri, right? That when Banu Israel is taken by Musa alayhi salam, and Allah safeguards them from Fir'aun, and they are at the base of Mount Tur, and now Musa alayhi salam is communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's gone for the 40 days. So what did what did the people left behind do? A person amongst them by the name of Musa Samiri, this person, he actually took all of the gold that Banu Israel possessed. He put it together, and he basically fashions the golden calf out of that. And then he took Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Al-Taha, that he took from the footprints of the animal of Jibreel alayhi salam, and he basically took that dirt and he poured it onto the calf. And as a result of that calf basically became animated. It came alive, so it would seem. And then Banu Israel basically started worshipping this calf. So when Musa alayhi salam comes down and he asks, he confronts Samiri, he said that, why did you do this? Right? So Samiri, one answer, he not only does he explain how he did it, but then he says that, وَكَذَلِكَ سَوَّلَتْ لِي نَفْسِي. I just felt like doing it. My ego, my nafs just told me to do it, so I just did it for fun. So this is a very dangerous thing, that when a person does not temper their nafs and their egos, it will always lead a person towards evil, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talks about that in this surah, in the accounting of Zulaykha, the wife of the Aziz of Misr, when she basically was confronted by the king that you committed this evil action against Yusuf, you accused him of adultery, and you had him thrown into prison, and all of this. Like when she admits her guilt, she makes a statement that وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ, that I am not absolving my own ego, rather it is the ego. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ, the ego is always inclined towards disobedience, right? Inclined towards evil, right? So this is, inshallah, we'll get into this discussion as we reach those ayat and talk a little bit more about the nafs and the ego itself and how a person can improve upon that. But coming back to the point over here, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا, Yaqub alayhi salam is saying that this is something that you guys just made up on your own, right? بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا, that you guys just, I know of your jealousy that you had towards Yusuf, right? And in order to basically get back at him, this is just something that you guys made up and you're inventing yourself, right? I know that you're speaking a lie, but I have no control. I cannot, I can't punish you, or I can't take retribution from you. I can't get the truth out of you because I know how much you hate Yusuf. So then the next statement is فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. So what I'll do is I'll have patience, right? Patience is best, right? Patience is most fitting in this scenario, because Allah, Wallahu al-musta'anu ala ma tasifun, because at this point in time there's nothing left for me to do except to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding what you have described, right? Regarding your plot, regarding your planning and your evil intentions toward Yusuf. I am powerless to do anything about it at this moment, so I will leave it in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I will have patience, right? So this is the way that Yaqub alayhi salam, he deals with with their lies, basically. So one of the points that ulama and scholars of tafsir, they say that in this statement, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا, this is the same statement that Yaqub alayhi salam also makes when, later on in the story, the other brother of Yusuf alayhi salam, Binyamin, is also sent with the caravan. They go there, and then Yusuf alayhi salam, hatches a plot to detain Binyamin so that they can remain together. Now, when he is accused of stealing and he's now detained behind, and the brothers come out, the Yehuda basically tells them that this is something that I can't handle, right? I took a promise for the second time from our father that we're going to return Binyamin back, and now he's not coming back with us, right? So when they come back, the brothers, and they tell Yaqub alayhi salam that, oh, Binyamin stole, etc., etc., Yaqub alayhi salam makes the same statement, and he says, "Bal sawwalat lakum anfusukum amra," that this is something again that you guys are making up on your own. But what's interesting to note is that "Bal sawwalat lakum anfusukum amra," this statement over here is actually a true statement, because they were actually lying, right? They were lying that Yusuf had been eaten by a wolf. However, in the second part, when he says "Bal sawwalat lakum anfusukum amra," at that case they weren't lying. Binyamin had actually been detained, and he had been detained with the excuse of stealing. So this indicates that Yaqub alayhi salam, although he was a prophet of Allah, it is possible that in personal opinions, that sometimes prophets of Allah even can be wrong in their opinions, related to this world, right? Related to this world, not related to the Sharia, not related to the Akhirah, not related to the religion itself, but it is possible that with regards to worldly affairs, a personal opinion of a prophet can be wrong. And there are some examples that are also found in the life of our own beloved Prophet ﷺ himself. But nevertheless, the lesson that we take from this is that if even the prophets of Allah can be, wrong in some of their opinions, it is possible for them to be wrong in some of their opinions, then what does that speak for you and I? Many a times we come across people who are very, adamant about their opinions. They're very, hardcore. They're very, unwavering. So this is a lesson for all of us, that no matter how many times, or how much we may think that our opinions are right, we should always have this apprehension within ourselves that there is a possibility that I may be wrong. Because if a person does not have that apprehension, then this will lead to arrogance, right? When a person thinks that they're always right, then this is, a sign of arrogance. So a person should avoid that. Allama Qurtubi rahimahullah, he actually mentions this statement, that if the prophets of Allah actually themselves, also have to be careful about their own personal opinions, then what does that speak for you and I as, as common folk? So that's the one lesson that we derive from this. Second lesson is fasabrun jamil, right? Sometimes we will come across situations in our own lives where literally there's nothing that you can do, right? It's out of our hands. It's out of a person's hands. There's literally nothing that a person can do. In those cases, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us that instead of giving into despair, instead of just losing yourself, instead of just, completely breaking down, Allah gives us the beautiful mechanism of sabr, right? The beautiful mechanism of patience. And this is, another test that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a way for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the believers stronger, right, in their faith, in their own lives. Allah makes them go through tragedy, and Allah, through the quality of patience, Allah makes them stronger, right? And that is why the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith that عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. That I am amazed at the affairs of a believer. There's not a single affair in the life of a believer except that it is filled with goodness, right? And this is not the case for anyone else except for a believer. He says, "In أصابته سراء شكر فكان خيرا له, وإن أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خيرا له." That if a believer is going through good times and then they are thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their blessings, for everything that Allah has given to them, then Allah will reward them in the best of ways. Allah says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful to me, I will increase you in those blessings and those bounties. And likewise, وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاءَ صَبَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ. That a person is going through difficulty, a person is going through a trial, a tribulation, a challenge, right? The love of the death of a loved one, right? Financial loss. Maybe a person is on the street. Maybe the death of a child, subhanallah. Maybe a person got into an accident. Maybe a person is suffering through a disease or something like that. So misfortune or a trial, a challenge has afflicted, hard times have fallen upon the person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us to have patience during those times. Why? Because patience is something that literally prepares a person to receive the divine blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It literally tempers the nafs, it tempers the soul, right? Allah is literally preparing you for better things that are coming your way, most definitely, right? Inna ma'al usri yusra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Inshirah that most definitely with difficulty comes ease. And He repeats this statement, with difficulty comes ease. That means that every time there's difficulty, there's always going to be ease before that, and there's going to be ease after that. So no matter where we are in terms of problems, in terms of difficulties, even if you cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, as a believer from the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah, that belief is something that will help you keep carrying on day after day, month, week after week, month after month. You can still pick up yourself and keep moving on. And the more you do that, the more closer you are to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is exactly what Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam is exemplifying, by him saying, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, right? That it is better for me to have patience right now. It is better for me to not lose myself, not become hysterical, not become, not go into a fit of rage, because rage, becoming angry at this moment is not going to help me. Right? Giving into despair is not going to help me. I need to be able to function and move forward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my helper. Wallahu al-musta'anu ala ma tasifun. That Allah is the best, Allah is the best helper. Allah is the best type of help to be sought out. Right? There's nobody that can top the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So if that is where the source of all things come from, then I seek, help from Him. Right? There's nobody else that I would turn to in this state. And this is something that teaches us the pinnacle of a person's faith, that how do you deal, your iman and your faith is going to be tested most when you are tested through difficult times, when you are tested through tragedy and challenges and sickness and bad times, right? And that is when your faith will manifest itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do that in order to, in order for you to strengthen yourself and to grow. And the person who is able to pass through that test, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward the people of patience with a reward that is completely limitless. So this is some of the things that we derive from this. Another thing that another lesson that we derive is that, as I mentioned in the ayat previously, that when people come to you in a hysterical, basically when a person comes to you with sad stories and they're presenting their accounts in a very emotional way and whatever, don't just take them as face value, right? Especially if you know a person whose character might be in question. If you know a person really closely and you know them to be a genuine person, then that is a different issue altogether. But if this is a person that they have done dubious things in the past, then you need to You need to be careful yourself that you don't get taken advantage of. And that is why, Yaqub alayhi salam, he didn't just believe their words, but rather he asked for evidence to be presented that, Yusuf was actually eaten by a wolf. And when he saw the evidence, he immediately understood that this evidence has been falsified, right? So it is the responsibility of every Muslim that in every situation, in order to protect yourself, you need to not only see the statement, hear the statement, but also see evidence of that. So if somebody's asking you for money, somebody is asking you for assistance, you can help them, right? And sometimes, but at the same time, don't just give in every time, right? Because there are people out there. We live in a society that unfortunately there's a lot of there's a lot of dishonesty, right? There's a lot of lying. There's a lot of lack of morals, right? That people will use the name of Allah. They'll maybe use the masjid. They'll maybe use other religious streams in order to basically emotionally manipulate people and take benefit in whatever the way that they can. So you need to be careful about that. Seek maybe evidence, maybe make mashwara and consult someone else about a situation that you're involved in before you take a decision, because you don't want to end up hurting yourself and those that are around you and your loved ones. So this is another lesson that we take from this. Another thing that to mention over here, subhanallah, the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam is mentioned here in this ayah number 18, that وَجَاءُوا عَلَى قَمِيصِهِ. Al-Mawardi actually says that, the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam is actually, in its own way, it's like one of the wonders of the world. The reason being is that the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam actually was the center point in three different prophetic miracles, or basically you can say that they were part of the history of they were part of the prophetic annals of Yusuf alayhi salam. So we find that this is one of the instances where the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam was presented as evidence of his being killed by a wolf, right? So the shirt was highlighted, that look, the shirt is filled with blood. It's a bloodied shirt. It is the shirt of Yusuf, right? And he has actually been killed by a wolf, right? And although Yaqub alayhi salam did not believe them, because obviously they had falsified that, this was a center point that the shirt of Yusuf was used. The second point is where Zulaykha, the wife of the minister, the finance minister, actually seduces Yusuf alayhi salam, and he's basically trying to get away from her, and he's exiting. And what happens is that when he gets to the last door and that door opens and she's running behind him, she's chasing him, he happens to find the Aziz, right, the head of the household, right at the door. And before he can even say anything, Zulaykha accuses him and says to her husband that, what type of punishment are you going to basically give Yusuf, because he just tried to rape me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to proclaim his innocence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused a baby to speak up from the cradle, right? A baby that was literally in the cradle, was so young, a newborn baby. This baby miraculously spoke up, and this baby said that, look, why don't we look at the evidence? If the shirt is ripped from behind, right, then it means, if the shirt is ripped from the front, then it means that Yusuf is guilty and Zulaykha was innocent, because he came onto her, and in order to defend herself, she ripped his shirt. And if the shirt is ripped from behind, then this means that Zulaykha is guilty and Yusuf is innocent, because Yusuf is trying to run away and Zulaykha is grabbing his shirt from the back. This means that he's not advancing on her, but rather it is she who is trying to seduce him. So the second instance where the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam was used as an evidence. The third incident is where Yusuf alayhi salam discloses his identity to his brothers, and he says, Ana Yusuf wa hadha akhi, I am Yusuf and this is my brother Binyamin. And then he tells his brothers that return back to Canaan and take this shirt of mine. Take this shirt of mine. He takes off his shirt and he gives it to them. And he says that go and rub it over the face of my father, right? Go and rub it over the face and the eyes of Yaqub alayhi salam. His sight will come back to him, right? Because Yaqub alayhi salam had, cried so much over the loss of Yusuf alayhi salam that he had lost his eyesight. So it was miraculous in its nature that the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam became the cause of the cure of the eyesight of Yaqub alayhi salam. So this is something, a very interesting point to note over here. We have a very little time, so I'll just move on to the next two ayat and very quickly point out some things from here. In ayah number 19, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَتْ سَيَّارَةٌ فَأَرْسَلُوا وَارِدَهُمْ فَأَدْلَى دَلْوَهُ. So there came a company of travelers, right? Sayyara here refers to either wayfarers, meaning travelers, or it refers to a caravan that was moving. فَأَرْسَلُوا وَارِدَهُمْ فَأَدْلَى دَلْوَهُ. Over here, waridahum basically means that they sent somebody to go and seek water, to bring back water for them. And this person goes and he finds this well that's in the middle of the jungle, and he basically lets down his bucket in order to draw water from this well. And what happens is that Yusuf alayhi salam climbs onto this bucket that has been lowered, and when he pulls up the string, the rope, he finds in this bucket, instead of water, there's a beautiful boy whose face is, one of the most beautiful things ever. And he cries out in amazement. He says, "Qala ya Bushra hadha ghulam." Oh my goodness, this is ya Bushra. This is amazing, right? How did this happen, right? I thought to myself that this is a scary place. It's in the middle of the jungle. It's a well that hasn't been used. And now I'm finding this beautiful child in here, right? And as we know that Yusuf alayhi salam himself was not an ordinary person. He was not just an ordinary boy. He possessed, amazing beauty, right? He was amazingly handsome. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was actually, he mentions in a hadith that when I went up for Mi'raj and I met Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, I could tell that the beauty that Allah had given him, the handsomeness that Allah had given him, Allah had basically split beauty in half, and half was given to Yusuf, and the other half was sent down into the world to basically be shared by every person, right? So all of the beauty that we see around us, this is just half of that quality of beauty that was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was the beauty of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَسَرُّوهُ بِضَاعَةً, right? That they concealed him, taking him as merchandise, right? So ulama and scholars, they differ on the meaning of this. That what did it mean that وَأَسَرُّوهُ بِضَاعَةً, right? It is either that the person who discovered him, right, he hid him, right, from the rest of the caravan so that he could go and he could sell him later, and that way he wouldn't have to share his profits. And the other thing is, وَأَسَرُّوهُ بِضَاعَةً, is the caravan people themselves, they hid him because they were afraid that somebody would come looking for this beautiful child and they would claim, right, they would claim this child back for themselves. So that's why they hid him and they pretended like he was one of their slaves. Wallahu alimun bima ya'malun. And then the ayah ends off by that Allah is saying that He is aware of what they were doing to him. So over here, وَأَسَرُّوهُ بِضَاعَةً can also have another meaning according to the ulama and scholars of Tafsir. It is that the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam actually turned him into merchandise. How did this happen? That we talked about the fact that Yehuda, he was in this well for 3 days, and Yehuda was coming to give him water and drink. Food and drink. And what happened is that after the third day, he could not find him. So Yehuda goes back to his brothers and he informs them that, look, I was taking food and drink for him, but he's not there anymore. So somehow they managed to locate this caravan and they find Yusuf with them. And they actually, They said that, oh, this is this child that you have, he's just an escaped slave of ours, and you need to return him back to us, because if you don't, then we're going to basically accuse you of thievery. And the caravan people did not want to be accused of that, so they decided to negotiate, and they struck a bargain with the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam. They struck a bargain that, okay, fine, give us some money and we'll give him to you, because at the end of the day they wanted to get rid of him, right? And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the next ayah, وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, that they sold him for a very paltry amount of money, very little amount of money, right? For just a few silver coins, right? وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, and they had not much interest in him. Like they weren't really worried about him. They were disinterested in him, right? It wasn't that they really viewed him to be a real commodity, and that they would sell him at a very high price and whatever. They didn't care about him, right? So again, this ayah can have two meanings: is either that the caravan people sold him in Egypt, right, for a very few silver coins, right? And they were, they didn't care about him. They didn't, understand his worth. A. B is وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. The word shira is actually in Arabic, it is used both for buying and selling. So in this, if we take the second account into into perspective, where the brothers actually became the people that sold Yusuf alayhi salam, then in this case, the brothers sold him at a very reduced price, and the caravan people also bought him at a very reduced price. So in both ways, they were guilty of, disregarding the worth of Yusuf alayhi salam, right? So because they negotiated, with for him in this way, although they could have done so much more. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is what happened, right? This is what happened. And the reason why the brothers of وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, Allah says that they had not much interest in him. And that is why the scholars who believe in the second opinion that the brothers were the one that sold him, they say that وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ means that they weren't really worried about making money off of him. Their first intention was what? To get rid of him, right? So the scholars of Tafsir, they mention, some accounts actually mention that darahim ma'duda over here refers to at that time when they used to transact and they used to do business. If it was something of a larger quantity, they would actually weigh that thing, and if it was something that was countable up to the number of 40, then they would basically count it. So by saying darahima ma'duda, bakhsin darahima ma'duda, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that the number was less than 40. So the ulama and scholars of tafsir, according to one narration, they say that it was either 20 dirhams that they sold Yusuf alayhi salam at, and those 20 dirhams were split into 2 dirhams per brother, right? So they made 2 dirhams off of selling Yusuf alayhi salam. So this is another one thing that is mentioned over here. But the last thing that I would like to reflect upon, and then inshallah we'll end off of this halaqah, is that look at the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And this is also an indication to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was again going through a lot of difficulty at the time when Surah Yusuf was revealed. Then look at the amazing plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how it happens that, subhanallah, scholars mention that this, Al-Qurtubi mentions that this caravan was actually traveling from Syria to Egypt, right? And they actually happened to lose their way. They got lost. They went into this desolate place, and then they just happened to send, somebody to get water, and out of nowhere he finds this well. So it's like, it's so amazing. It's like almost impossible. Like it happened by accident, right? It happened by chance. But in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displaying for us His power, that when Allah intends to do something, He is fa'alun lima yurid. He is free to do whatever He wishes, and His plan is the perfect plan, right? When Allah does something, it is filled with subtlety. It is filled with an amazing and very precise plan that the brothers of Yusuf, the caravan people, they all tried to, disgrace him. They all tried to bring him down. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made such a plan where he was not only rescued, but he was going to be set up into place for bigger things to come, as we will discover as we progress throughout the story. In the same way, is a lesson for the Prophet ﷺ and for all of us as believers as well, that no matter what we're going through, if we remain true to our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we put our faith, our tawakkul, our trust in Him, ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan for us, and that plan will allow us to succeed in the life of this world and also in the life of the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those type of people. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.